Now here is another figure showing many genes that have been shown to be associated as risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. This axis here shows the ones that are common, and this says how powerful they are. So here's a very powerful gene, but it's very rare. And this is what still Alice had in the movie. She had a very powerful gene that presents with symptoms in the 40s and 50s, but these genes are very rare. Well, less than 1% of all Alzheimer's have these particular genes, and we call them autosomal dominant genes. About 50% of people with Alzheimer's have this apolipoprotein E4 gene, ApoE4 for short. So this about 27% of the population has an ApoE4 gene, about 27%. Here is ApoE44. This means you can see that the risk of Alzheimer's is even higher if you have 2 copies of ApoE4. So this one doubles the risk of Alzheimer's. If you have 2 copies of it, the risk is tenfold. Now remember, each of our genes are paired. One of our pairs comes from our mom, one of them comes from our dad. So all of us have 2 copies of ApoE. We could have E3. These are the types of, ApoE comes in 3 flavors. I've just said that ApoE4 is a risk factor for Alzheimer's. It's the most common risk factor for Alzheimer's. So if we call this the general population after age 65, and this is the risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, it goes up with age. It doubles every 5 years. If someone has 1 copy of E4, the risk doubles, and if a person has 2 copies of E4, it goes up tenfold. People who don't have an E4, like they have E3 or E2, then the risk is lower. The E2 is lower. This would be E2. It's lower than the general population. Unfortunately, E2, it's a protective factor. Unfortunately, it's very rare. But this is a protective factor. ApoE2 is a protective factor against Alzheimer's. Now, the medical profession does not recommend testing for ApoE4. How many of you know your ApoE genotype? My hands are down. I don't know mine. You know yours. Are you going to be telling you? You're not telling me. Okay. Well, he doesn't have E4, I can tell. I don't know. Okay, so there's a few people here that might know. Do you want to know after what I've told you? You do, okay. Okay, what if I said we're not sure what to do with that information? Do you still want to know?
Yes.
You do? Okay, so let's just show for everybody here. Because I've asked this question over the last 20 years that we've known about ApoE4 as a risk factor. I've asked, do you want to know? And 20 years ago, when I asked this question, not too many people raised their hand. But let's try again, 20 years later. How many people would want to know what your ApoE genotype is? Okay. Okay. And why would you want to know?
I have it.
Well, I'd love to know.
Because you said that treating asymptomatically might have a benefit.
Yeah.
So it would do us good enough.
Okay, right. We're getting to the area where we might be able to do something.
I already have early onset, so I would really like to know to help family members because my sister's struggling with the same thing.
Yeah.
And her nieces are petrified. My nieces, I'm
Yes.
my niece is petrified.
Yeah.
They're going to get it.
Okay. All right. Yes, one other.
First, I would play more golf.
Yes.
Second, I want to know if there's anything I can do to minimize the rapidity of onset symptoms.
Yes. So actually, I have a colleague who's a dean of a dean, and has 2 copies of ApoE4. So what does he do? He plays golf on the weekend. He plays tennis a lot during the week, and he has a very careful diet. I mean, so we don't have proof that the exercise helps, but we have a lot of suggestive evidence that it's good. Right.
Is it a high risk if you have two, like your father and your mother, the grandparents, if they had dementia?
Yes.
And the daughter
Yes.
has it, is it a high risk for the younger generation?
Yes, that's right. The more people in your family that have dementia, the more suggestive that it's risky. It's hereditary, but as I mentioned, it's not a single gene. There's over 20 different genes. This ApoE4 is associated with Alzheimer's in about half of people, but the other half don't have that. They might have some of those other common genes that are weak genes, but common, yes.